obviously the story that dominates the weekend, how we had car crashes where people were killed, the roads were beat to you know what, and it's a devastating story, and I'm going to try to be careful with how we handle it. Not only my comments by those, and also those made on the air today by others. So, yesterday afternoon, a 59-year-old man from Mitchell's Brook, up Mount Carmel Way, St. Mary's Bay, Don Dunphy. Dunphy was shot and killed by an RNC officer, a member of the Premier's security detail, as they responded to investigate a perceived threat against members of the House of Assembly and potentially against the Premier himself. Okay, so, man. Let's first read a collection of the tweets that led to this. This happened on Twitter, social media, where the threat was put forward. Okay, here's how it goes. Sandy Collins was in a car with the Premier heading out the highway, and they were listening to a CD. And it was a Sherman Downey CD. Okay, so Don Dunphy from Mitchell's Brook, he responds to Minister Collins. And there is a curse word in this, but it's important for context, so just bear with me, please. He says, won't mention any names this time. Two prick dead MHAs might have good family members I may hurt. He got them before they got to enjoy the pension they didn't deserve. I won't mention. I hope there is a God. I think I see him work on two garbage MHAs who laughed at poor people. But why would you care after putting in hard time getting that poor man's MHA pension? I hope you put on sunglasses and take out the earplugs. You might see and hear people crying for help. But why? And all tagged with the hashtag NLPoly, which is not fit to read the vast majority of the time. So, the threat, I guess, the perception of the threat, came from where he says, two prick dead MHAs might have good family members I may hurt. I've already been told by some people today that that doesn't constitute a threat. Well, it's interesting how everyone's an expert in everything all these times, but if you threaten a politician, if you threaten the Premier, and if you say you may hurt the Premier or kill the Premier or another member of the House of Assembly, you can count on the police knocking on your door. Now, what makes Paul Davis's life or a threat against Premier Davis or any other politician more important than a threat against me or Ryan Critch or any other citizen? No life, no one person is more important than the other, but we do have different rules when it comes to how we deal with politicians, especially in the arena of threats. There's a reason why the Premier has a security detail. They have the ability to enact policy that either has a positive or a negative effect on your life. They have an awful lot of authority, possibly far too much. So there's different rules surrounding how we deal with politicians. Is it right, just, fair? That's up to you. But if you say you're going to hurt the Premier of the province, you're going to get a knock on the door. So they knocked on Mr. Dunphy's door on Easter Sunday. People want to make something out of the fact it was Easter Sunday. We have to hope that law enforcement doesn't take days off on Easter Sunday, because the unfortunate reality of crime and threats never stops. So law enforcement is working. One member of the RNC, who I actually know who fired the shot, won't say his name until the police see fit to do so, he knocked on Mr. Dunphy's door, and a couple of minutes later, Mr. Dunphy was dead. The fatal shot fired by a member of the RNC. Apparently the shotgun that Mr. Dunphy owns was taken out. Now what that entails, I have no idea. Was it on the table, in his hand, pointed at the cop? I really, really don't know. People will also wonder aloud with some of the root cause issues that led to this circumstance. Whether or not Mr. Dunphy was mentally ill, for instance. I don't know. I met Don Dunphy before. He called this show many times. Was he mentally ill? I really, genuinely, sincerely, I don't know. His tweets and his emails over the last number of years, they went from a level of frustration based on the fact that he was living in poverty. He was alone. He was an injured worker. That's going to be a big part of the story, is the injured worker piece. He went from frustration to absolutely angry and never threatened me. Never said anything like that to me. But his messages became more and more angry and very, very harsh. Now, lots of people send harsh messages, and I'm not going to judge Don Dunphy because it's not fair and I think it's atrocious. So, did Mr. Dunphy require a certain level of attention that one police officer responding to a perceived threat more than he was afforded on this fateful and tragic afternoon? It's a fair question. One of the stories will absolutely be, as I said, the injured worker status. Dunphy was, in his estimation, hung out to dry by the system. He was hurt in a workplace incident, and because of it and his inability to work, he was left in deplorable living conditions, some people say, destitute, poor. And the anxiety and frustration and stress associated with that had led him to make a variety of comments, some of which have been perceived as a direct threat against the Premier. And it's very, very sad. He used to call about the roads, the state of the roads in Mount Carmel. He used to call about medical marijuana, how he needed it as a part of his medicinal treatment at home for his pain and suffering. So be it. But it's the injured worker piece that is really going to take on a life of its own. Also, it's the politics at play here. Already, since it's happened, many people have taken it upon themselves to make this, and all the while, this is really quite something, all the while they're asking us to remember that there's a man dead here. And that's right. And it's the important part of the story. John Dunphy is dead. They're going to make it political. And nothing less or more than that. I've had and received comments already where, remember, when Premier Davis was first elected as a retired member of the RNC, and one of his first moves was to bring in as his chief of staff, retired chief of police Joe Brown, the comments immediately went to police state. They were exaggerated and ridiculous then, and they still are today. People have already told me this morning in emails and in tweets that here's how they estimate how this story happened. Someone who was opposed to the Progressive Conservative Party of the province, and in reaction to Paul Davis and Joe Brown, they say, I've been told, that a mentally ill man, alone, sad, frustrated and angry, had the Premier of the province send a member of the RNC out there to do what eventually happened. That's ridiculous. I mean, we have got to be careful on this story, don't we? You have to also remember that the emotions that Mr. Dunphy was feeling were intensified by social media and by the political circumstance he found himself in and what he viewed to be the political circumstance here in this province. People played an active role in getting involved in conversations with him. They got amplified and intensified. And now we're going to make this a political issue. I mean, is that really where we think is the appropriate way to go here? You know, what constitutes a threat? And how is it that you know what the police should or should not be thinking or did think that day? I mean, here's a trained veteran member of law enforcement who I know to be a professional man. And he went out there with no intention on killing Don Dunphy. When a police officer encounters someone in any state who draws a weapon or has one at hand close enough to pull the trigger and kill a member of a law enforcement team, the training that they undergo leads to this exact circumstance. Mr. Dunphy's dead. But we're going to politicize this. And people will take it upon themselves now to have this fit somewhere into their political agenda and motivation. If you're going to do that, that's up to you. You do as you see fit. But I really think we are betraying ourselves in political conversation in this province. We can't seem to stick to some of the real issues so far as the nitty-gritty and the details of public policy and behavior of our politicians and their agenda and motivation as elected members and powerful political parties. But we've taken it to a different level. Some of it is completely offside. Some of it is absolutely socially, publicly, and politically unacceptable. But we do it. If you're going to be one of the people who drive this story down that dangerous political road of this was an inevitability because of the past professional life of Davis, Brown, and others, you've got to think to yourself in your quiet moments, am I really portraying the story fairly? Am I doing any justice to Mr. Dunphy? Am I becoming part of the problem that is repeatedly becoming the cesspool of Newfoundland and Labrador politics? Is anything being satisfied? And then social media. The bravery that people exhibit on social media and email is also quite bizarre. They say things they would not normally say to anybody's face. They say it on Twitter, and happy to do so. You see it every day if you're a member of the Twitterati. I see it all the time. Some of the comments are extraordinary. They're beyond harsh, and they're threatening. Look, I've been threatened, as many of you know, and many, many times. the way we have intensified the conversation, and it becomes a snowball effect. One comment is made, others jump in, it gets retweeted, those who are frustrated pile on, and off it goes. And it's not all just aimed at Harper, and it's not all just aimed at Davis. I think it's the overall tone and tenor of politics and political conversation in the province. Political discourse is not going down a road where we think that a threat gets anywhere and or makes life better and or resonates in the ears or in the hearts and minds of politicians or other members of society who you need for your support. Strength in numbers. I think it's getting away from us. It really is. I don't know what led to this. I mean, I saw the collection of tweets. I read other members of the Twitter sphere who I follow and follow me, where they've said particularly bizarre things and some very threatening things. I try to settle down and check myself when I go to write back on some of this. Now, I engage purposefully because I'm not an elected member. I'm just a normal member of society. And I've offered someone a shot down to the Rock 3 o'clock, and that's fine. But make no mistake, if you write those types of things and indicate you're willing to hurt the Premier or another elected official, you're going to get a visit from the police. I feel terrible for Dunphy. I feel terrible for his family. I felt Don Dunphy's pain through his messages when it came to his injured worker status and the poverty that it left him living in. It's horrendous. Everybody deserves much better treatment than Don Dunphy received from the system. It is an important part of the story. We have other injured workers out there now who are absolutely in combination with the frustration, the loss of a lifestyle, and the ability to be physically fit and active and ready for work. And to know that many of them are in the churn of the compensation world and the frustrations associated with doctors' visits and appeals. It's atrocious, and the system is broken. The system is absolutely broken, and it's got to be fixed. Politicians have the ability to fix it. But this in combination is a really very tricky, dangerous story. People are already going a bit too far. Now, it's up to you. You know me. Whatever you decide to do, whatever you think you want to say, what can I say about it? Nothing. It's your opinion. You say whatever you like. But we're going to make something out of this that's not there. We're going to put the blame on Paul Davis, and that's ridiculous. We're not going to question the professional training of a police officer, what happened in that kitchen or in that home when none of us were there, and what the issue was with Mr. Dunphy's shotgun, and how the police responded. We can only hope, and I think we're going to see a very thorough investigation with an outside police force. We're going to hear from the Chief of Police, Bill James, today. We're going to hear from the Premier today. I don't imagine we're going to hear any details. We're going to hear messages of condolence and sympathy to the Dunphy family, and maybe not much more. Now, you can say whatever you like, and if you want to say something about it on air today, on any level, I'm just going to ask you to be careful, because, I have to be careful. So, if you blame it on the Davis, then you got to ask yourself why you're doing that. And if you're blaming it on the cop, fine. If you want to blame it on the system, and how a potentially mentally ill man, hungry, alone, sad, frustrated, very, very angry, what the level of threat is, that's all up for discussion today, and I'm happy to entertain. Do we have any calls yet, Ryan? We do. Just one moment. Also, a couple other stories just to throw in the churn, because there's a lot going on in the province, and there always is. And I feel horrible about what happened on this weekend with Dunphy. I can't believe it happened. As soon as I heard the story, I had a sick feeling in my stomach it was Don Dunphy. Because I know where he lives. Because I met the man. That's my neck of the woods, the Daly family. So, boys, it's just extraordinary what goes on. Politics is getting away from us in this province, I know that much. Anyway, let's check the Twitter. Twitter's exploding. I know people are going to be mad with me because you want me to pile on and make this a Paul Davis story or an Easter Sunday story or anything else, when in fact the story is a man who we don't know whether or not he needed help, mental health issues or otherwise. He's dead. And the political nature and overtones of this conversation will get the best of us. Welcome back to the show. Line 5. Brad, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Morning to you.
Before I start on the topic I wanted to call on today, I just wanted to congratulate yourself and your son for shaving for the brave and showing some real classy and strong leadership.
Well, we were quite happy to do it. I'm extremely proud of Jack, as I am of my son Nicholas. Boy, they're lovely kids. I'm a lucky man.
Right on. Calling today, Patty, about Donnie, and very, very upset about it. As you may know, I cover a lot of even international stuff. I write stories on it. It gets translated in different languages on human rights abuses and also on everything of that kind of sort of thing you can imagine. This has me literally sick to my stomach, I have to say. I mean, I've never felt this way before about this kind of event. It makes me really angry.
What's the angry portion of it for you, Brad?
Well, the angry part of it. The angry part, I suppose, is, a few things. First of all, I read the tweets, and I didn't see any threat in those tweets. I'm sorry, I just didn't. I definitely didn't see any threat in there to warrant an officer going out to this man's home. I just didn't see it.
If anybody, I think, says that they are going to hurt anybody belong to a politician's family or a politician himself, I think you can count on a visit to your home, don't you? I mean, isn't that just pretty standard operations?
Well, I'll say this, Patty. I think when he said hurt, and you have to remember the context of that conversation, I think he was thinking about hurting their feelings. I don't think he was talking about actually physically hurting anybody. But
that's why we investigate.
I know what it's like, Patty, to be threatened. Don't forget there was a time here 3 years ago, or 4 years ago now, I suppose it is, when I had a member of this government's EA come to my home and threaten me and my family.
Right, and he threatened you with repercussions personally and professionally, as opposed to, like, he didn't have a weapon with him and he wasn't a police officer.
No, he didn't have a weapon with him. But the bottom line is he threatened me with personal destruction.
Yeah, no, I remember the story.
And, so I know what it's like to be threatened. I just can't help feeling here that something here has gone very, very, very wrong. There is just... and I'm sorry, but, part of the anger that I feel this morning is to do with Sandy Collins, to be honest with you. Sandy Collins, as a member of this government, and I'm not being political here. This is not political. This is just humane. This is about the human story. Gets on Twitter and has for years, and you know this yourself, and goes on Twitter often, is provocative, in your face, and so forth. And, irresponsible and without accountability. And this is like a reoccurring theme. Irresponsibility without accountability. And now we have a tragedy. And my heart goes out for Donnie's family and, of course, for him, and what he suffered before he died, and now that he's had to die like this.
And we don't know what happened in that home, and I don't know, like, people, some people who are just completely out of touch themselves, they're saying that someone went out to execute a man yesterday, when in fact we don't know the level of despair Mr. Dunphy is feeling. We have no idea what he did or did not do with a shotgun, whether it was within reach or in his hand or pointed at the officer. Like, I don't know what went on, and I do know that Donnie Dunphy had reached the end of his rope. That much I'm sure of, given my interactions with him personally. That can only be my personal take on it, because he sent me, I'm not kidding you, over the years, 1,000 messages. For sure, 1,000.
I don't in any way believe that an officer went out there to execute Donnie Dunphy. I don't believe that. I won't believe that. I'd have to be proven not to believe that. What I think happened here is first of all, a complete overreaction to a Twitter conversation without any stretch of the imagination. A complete exaggeration of what happened and an overreaction and into a situation. Don't forget, yourself that I'm a veteran, okay? We have guys with PTSD. We have guys who suffer extreme depression and everything else. Put in certain circumstances, they're not going to be rational because they aren't rational. It's part of what they're suffering from. You got to remember that. These aren't people without issues. Now, because of that overreaction, in my opinion, extreme overreaction.
But now, Brad, on that front, I mean, you can have a police officer come to your home, and we have to remember that they don't bring us, unless it's a tactical unit or a so-called, as people will visualize, a SWAT team. If an RNC member or an RCMP officer comes to your door, even if it's to take your statement about your purse being robbed. They have the same uniform, the same gun, and the level of investigation might be on different subject matter, but not, I don't imagine, handled any differently so far as the emotion of the police. We know the police, to have their training, really speaks for itself in the vast majority of law enforcement, with a very level-headed, careful approach to investigating, whether it be someone punched me in the face, or someone stole my lawnmower, or my snowblower, or, Mr. Dunphy in this case, whatever someone perceives to be a threat. So when indeed a police officer comes to your door to investigate anything under the sun, the way that investigation, that conversation goes, will be dictated by the person being interviewed, by and large. And I think that's a fair comment, and I think I've seen the police in action enough, not because they've investigated me for anything, but I've seen these types of things happen. And like, even when we see the video camera of police investigations in interrogation rooms with accused murderers and what have you, it's always a very, very similar tact taken and tone taken by the police. Maybe, I'm sure there's rubber hose stuff that goes on behind closed doors. But in this instance, Mr. Dunphy's reaction with a gun has led to his death. I mean, is that not a fair summary based on everything we know to be a fact? If there was a gun available to Mr. Dunphy, that's what went on here. Sandy Collins didn't send a cop to the door. The Premier of the province is not to blame here. The officer's life has been turned upside down given the fact he pulled the trigger that ended a man's life. So it's what went on in that house will be the actual meat and potatoes of why he died. How we got to that, mental health issues, injured worker, politics, social media, that'll be a side story to the real investigation by the police, won't it?
Well, first of all, we don't know what happened in the house. We don't know.
I have no idea.
The man went for a gun, or that he had a gun. We don't know whether he was threatened to shut up. We don't know what happened in that house. Mm-hmm. All we know is that the man is dead. But what I do know is that based on that exchange on Twitter, that there is the whole sending an officer to that man's home was a complete overreaction to the situation. And
why? But why? I mean, how can it be couched as that?
There was no threat made to the Premier or Sandy Collins.
Well, so we're all supposed to think that because we do have different levels and different rules involving how you can and cannot speak to a variety of people, including a police officer, including the politicians. So we're just supposed to read into it that a really absolutely angry and frustrated man whose comments are not just this one string of tweets. I mean, we can go down and look through Mr. Dunphy's Twitter feed and emails that he sent to, I would suggest, members of the House of Assembly, me included, that we were just thinking that he didn't want to hurt their feelings. And when he was very quick to not be too worried about their feelings, and I'm not judging down Dunphy, and I refuse to go down that road, but we're supposed to read into it the most innocent read of all time, just say he was concerned about hurting someone's feelings, as opposed to actually hurting someone. And is that really what we're saying?
What he said was, Patty, is that he didn't want to hurt. The way I read that conversation, that he didn't want to hurt the feelings of family members. That. And a lot of people feel that way. A lot of people. But what I'm not saying is, it's neither right or wrong. What I'm saying is, did this man actually threaten the Premier or Mr. Collins? And anybody can go and look at that Twitter exchange, and there's no way he said, I'm coming to whatever you. He didn't say that. And yet, the police force, for whatever reason, decided to go to the man's home and confront him about a threat to the Premier's life. And, I get back to it, a complete overreaction without any accountability. Now we have a man dead because he tweeted about...
But that's not fair, Brad. But that's, once again, you are doing your best to put it in a certain light for whatever reason it is. The man is not dead because of a tweet. The man is dead because there was a firearm altercation in his home on Easter Sunday. That's why the man is dead. Let's stick to really what's going on here. Right?
I suppose if you want to cut it down to that, Patty...
Because that's where we cut things down to. The real nuts and bolts of it. There's lots of things that led into his frustration. There's lots of reasons why the police were at his door. But the ultimate reason, he's not dead because of a tweet. He's dead because there was some sort of altercation involving deadly weapons, firearms, in his home on Easter Sunday. That's why the man is dead. And we've got to be careful on this. I think we do. He's getting away from us.
That's true to a sense. Assuming what you say is true, okay? And that's an assumption at this point, that it is. But, let's assume what you say is true, that there was an altercation with the weapons and everything else, which, you have no right to doubt that, right? Or no reason to doubt that, I should say. But I get back to the point, Patty, is not what happened at the home that ended up killing Mr. Dunphy. What happened, I get back to the point of why did the officer go out there in the first place? And that's the part that makes me really angry.
But we don't even know why exactly that is.
I say, there was no reason for that.
But we don't even know what went on. For instance, we don't even know if the police were reacting to that particular tweet. We just don't know. There's nothing to say that there's not an email sent from Mr. Dunphy to the Premier's office. We have no idea why the police were there, and we may learn more as the investigation continues and details become public knowledge. But we're not even sure that's why the cops were there. We have no idea. I mean, if Mr. Dunphy was able to send me an email, Lord knows he was willing to summarize his misery as an injured worker, his living in poverty because of his injured worker condition. We don't know how this made it to the Premier's office or the RNC. We're guessing that it was one tweet that people have isolated, will hang their hat on as this is why, and oh my God, this is not a threat. But we have no idea even on that front. And that's why I think until we know more, we should be loath to go down the road of making this a political issue, when this may indeed be something much, much different than we know currently. And that's my only position on this.
I want to be clear that I just don't believe that this in any way is a political issue.
Well, it absolutely is. I'm not saying from you, but I've got people here this morning. You should, if anyone would like to, come sit in my booth and read my Twitter feed. You would be shocked. And if you want to read my email, then my take on it, that people are willing to make it a political issue, is very, very real. I'm not making this up for the show. This is right in front of me. I'm reading these things. We'll be having people as Premier Secret Police, executions, this kind of stuff. People are willing to do, and then we're going to have police state comments. Davis's background as a cop, Mr. Brown's position in his office. People are willing to go down that road. Well, we don't even know what's going on here yet. And I think it's a pretty dangerous level of conversation. Given the type of political discourse that we suffer in this province in the first place, I think we're being very, very, very reckless with how we're going to discuss this. And people are willing to say, and you can say whatever you like, whatever people think, sure, that's not up to me. But I think we should be careful, because there's a lot of important matters here, and we are quite willing to make quick judgments, snap judgments without any actual details to sink our teeth into, and that's just my basic position on it, and I don't know what else to say on that front anymore. But Brad, you're always welcome to call the show, as you know, and your opinion has been heard by the listeners this morning, and they'll make up their own mind.
Right on, Patty. Thanks for the opportunity to try and get this off my chest. Unfortunately, I still feel the same way when...
I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I'm only saying my piece. This is not about me preaching to you or you preaching at me. We throw all the different comments out there. People will make up their own mind, and we'll have hopefully a very thorough, exhaustive conversation, or investigation, pardon me, that will prove once and for all what did or did not happen. And I appreciate your time this morning.
Thanks, Patty.
All the best. Bye-bye. Let's see here. How are we doing on the phones, Ryan? We got a few calls? Let's keep the calls pouring in here, and we can talk about whatever you like. If it's about the Dunphy issue, then it's absolutely up to you what you want to call the show about, or anything else under the sun. We're open to that conversation as well. We're going to take a very quick break, and then we're coming back. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line 7. John, you're on the air.
Hi, Patty. How you doing today?
Fine today. Thank you. How are you?
No, not too bad. I heard your preamble earlier, and I got to admit I was pretty impressed how a well-balanced approach you took on the whole situation, where it's fairly new and raw. And, I have to disagree with Brad as a retired ex-veteran myself. I don't like the idea of throwing PTSD into this situation of a tragedy that could have easily resulted in a death of a police officer as well. We don't know what the situation is.
Exactly right. We don't know. We have no idea, nor do we know why the police were there in the first place. So,
right.
It's a pretty tricky territory.
So, I think, and also I got to disagree with Brad, he's looking at a conspiracy right now, and I don't know if there is one or not, but the point is, I just think it's too quick to throw that out and to name an MHA. I'm not saying it wasn't. I don't know. I'm just saying that right now it's one of those situations of, I like to kind of go back to procedures in place, and not really that. I looked at the tweets actually. I'm glad you pointed that out to everybody. It's fairly easy to go back to Mr. Dunphy's Twitter just to take a look at it, and obviously he was very upset over the years about different things from the federal to provincial levels on care, and he had every right to be. For that aspect, I understand that. But it's easier for, I guess, the backseat quarterbacks to come in and say, well, what's a perceived threat and what's not a perceived threat. If it wasn't investigated and something happened, then everybody would be going the other way. So,
I do feel.
So it's one of those situations, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. I do feel that they needed to investigate. I don't know if it was a phone call or a personal visit. I don't know what was the procedure in place or what is allowed. But the other thing it comes back to, it was within 48 hours from the time of that tweet, which was about 1:30 in the morning, that tweet was mentioned, I believe.
I'm not sure of the time frame on it, to be honest with you.
The timestamp, I think, the doctor put out there was 1:30 a.m. on, I believe, I thought it was a.m. in April 3rd. So just, I'm not sure what involved in that. Was that just, frustration? Was it, there's a lot involved in that type of tweet that could be perceived in a lot of different ways.
Well, it's easy enough to read it that he didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but it's absolutely easy enough to read it that he was willing, after the thousands of notes he had sent out that were at a certain level of frustration and disgust with the system and politics and the PC party. It's not a stretch to read it into that could be a perceived threat against the Premier of the province. I mean, I don't know why people are so willing to say, oh my God, how could that be read any other way? Plus, we don't even know why they were there. There could have been a threat in the mail or an email that was absolutely distinct. The shotgun I have is going to be aimed at his head. Look, we don't know. I mean,
exactly.
It's just unreal what goes on here.
And you're 100% right. This is why people got to calm down. And I realize a lot of people feel, I've never had a police officer come to my house, but obviously they feel it's an invasion of their privacy on a holiday. I understand. I've talked to a few people already about this, and they were kind of, it's kind of strange that they send a cop on 2:30 on a day where there might be a few drinks and a turkey on the go. And I understand why people would say that, but still they have a job to do. And like you said, you can't just take a holiday when you feel like it. I guess the problem I have, if there's any problem, or I guess question I have, Patty, would be, it's a fairly remote area, isn't it? It's like you get a distance between other cops.
Yeah, well, there's only, I guess the closest cop is just a very small squad, and the closest one might even be in Holyrood, is it?
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, okay.
And to be honest with you, I don't mean any disrespect between cop and police officer. I'm just making a statement. I guess the biggest thing I'm trying to figure out, why would a cop go out there by himself? What's the procedure? Shouldn't two cops go out, or shouldn't?
I don't know.
I don't know. I guess that's part of what's going to happen in the investigation. But if there's anything to come out of this right now, that's what I would like to know. What's the procedure that's in place for, that cop was in his own danger to go out.
Yeah, when you're responding to something that is an investigation of a threat as they perceived it, right, then it does come across as a little bit odd. I mean, there's a reason police officers travel in pairs. It's right, for the concept of backup. So it is odd to to go to Mr. Dunphy's house on that front for that purpose and be alone. It is quite strange. I'm sure we'll hear from the Chief of Police on that today.
I hope so, because that's one of those questions that I think everybody's, I'm assuming most people are asking. Yeah, and also it's a backup for that person to find out what's the mental state of this person they're seeing. Yep. If they have any evidence that there was a mental health issue, and I've dealt with that on different levels through my career and other things, why weren't there, a mental health person with them, possibly? You don't know. And that's kind of why I kind of wanted people to keep that in mind. It's not just a cut and dry thing. There's lots of things that could be done here. Like, say, it could be another tragedy if a police officer was killed in this incident. But, it's a tragedy either way.
It could have been two dead people in that room, and it's really quite extraordinary. John, I thank you and appreciate your call this morning.
No problem. You have a good day, Pat.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Boy, it's just, I got someone here telling me it's state-sponsored terrorism. Am I supposed to take these people serious? And I think we're all making this distinct mistake, and certainly presumptuous, and jumping to conclusions to point to one set of 5 tweets or whatever it is as for the sole reason the police were there. I mean, how does anybody know any of these things? I tried to figure out what I could prior to going on air this morning, and I can't find any reason to just be convinced that there was just that collection of tweets in reaction to listening to a CD in a car with the Premier as to why the police were there. It could be, maybe, but I sure as hell don't know, and I'm pretty sure many of you out there who are telling me that that's why it is, you don't know either. So, I mean, there's a broken system, and there was a broken man, and for some reason the police were there. And all we know to be an absolute fact is Don Dunphy's dead. And the rest of it, especially the political overtones, are really quite troubling. And from some people, they are literally disgusting. And it boggles my mind that so-called level-headed, concerned, involved citizens have gone to the length they're willing to go on this one today. State-sponsored terrorism. God almighty. We're taking a break and then we're coming back. Welcome back to the show. Line 2, Tom, you're on the air. Hi, Tom.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine today, man. How about
Yeah,
you?
listen, Paddy, your producer's kind enough to, I suppose, bump me ahead because I only phoned a couple of minutes ago.
Oh, geez, you've been sitting there for... Oh, geez, I might have taken the wrong line. Anyway,
okay,
sorry.
well, I'm here now anyway.
I'll give you a quick one in. Go ahead.
Okay, listen, all this talk about this morning, why don't you give it a rest until the family can mourn? Until the man is at least properly buried? Who's this fool is talking about state-sponsored terrorism?
Maniac on the West Coast.
Why are you talking about it, Paddy? Why are you talking about that basement dweller? Give us his name so we can all go and laugh at him. This family is mourning, boy. Give it a break.
It's an important conversation.
Talk about it later, will you, Paddy?
No. We're going to talk about it now because people are going to be talking about it. You want me to pretend it didn't happen?
No, I'm not saying not pretend it didn't happen. I'm saying, no, never pretend it didn't happen. My brother died under criminal circumstances and nothing out of it from this crowd. But I'm saying this man has family, Paddy. That's all I'm saying. Give it a break until they come forward.
Well,
okay,
I guess...
I'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Tom. Bye. Line 1, George, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How you doing?
Fine, not bad. You?
Not bad, not bad. My condolences go to the family of the guy that got shot, and also to the police officer and his family who obviously was put in a bad situation there. He obvious to me that if he went there alone, Patty, that was the first mistake, and I've had dealings myself with the Confederation building and have had the police come to my door. I never got shot at it or anything, but some of the reasons that they came to my property was because I had made reference to the Ottawa shootings, and I may have overstepped my boundaries in doing it at the time. There was just new legislation that came in that gave them the right to come and check out any kind of opinion, I guess, to why that would have happened. I believe that in our system now, there's a lot of people left out of it, and if you go by numbers, not everybody is going to go along with it. And some people, I always thought that it was okay to rebel, and if you had to write a letter or if you had to get on a computer, you're not hurting nobody. You're merely verbal. Like from my situation, why I was continually calling the Premier's office was a dental situation that I almost died over, and I had PTSD symptoms that I was being treated for while that was going on, and it worsened them. And I guess there were times, because I was warned not to get my teeth out to get them fixed, and there was no such program in place for that, and it caused me a lot of stress over the last 4 years, and I did clash with the governmental officials over it repeatedly. And
so what's the point, though, George? Sorry? What is your actual point? That we shouldn't react to threats if people write an email?
Well, I don't know what my point is. I'm just calling in to let you know my own experience with it, and I'm not sure if sending the police to residences are the right thing to be doing, because if it's at a boiling point when they show up, it can go very, very wrong, Patty, and that may not be criminal.
Well, it might be criminal. See, that's what police investigations determine what is and what is not criminal.
Well,
that's exactly the essence of it.
They're going to show up at somebody's door in the middle of an episode, a mental episode. The outcome for that is not going to be a good one. And they got no way of knowing what they're walking into.
So what do you, George, but I mean, this is kind of hard to follow. They don't know what they're walking into, so you don't walk into it, as opposed to go see what's going on as law enforcement to investigate an issue. You can't predetermine whether or not someone has a mental health issue unless it's diagnosed.
What you do is determine if there was a crime. And if there was
what
no
are you
crime,
talking about? That's why police investigate things, as to whether or not there's been a crime committed. If we don't know, how does anyone know what a crime is until you find a dead body, you just assume that they either killed over dead or someone who killed them. You investigate, and so the police were investigating.
No dead body, Patty, till they showed up.
Right, but there might have been a dead body if they hadn't shown up. See, that's how they investigate these things, right?
You know,
I mean, you're going out of your way to make this about something that it isn't. The police, if they are, you have to remember, the police are given orders from the top down. If someone perceived this to be a threat, and the role of that particular officer that day was to be sent to that man's home to investigate the perceived threat, he was doing what police officers are brought on to the payroll to do: investigate crime or the potential for crime, and to establish whether or not a threat was real or perceived. That's what they do. That's what the police do, right? That's what we need them to do. They have to investigate. And you can't investigate by reading someone's Twitter feed. You got to go investigate. And you got to speak to that person. You got to speak to others around them. That's just how it goes. Is that not fair? I mean, is that not legitimate?
To some degree.
To every degree.
No, I don't say to every degree. Like I said, they could show up in the middle of an episode.
They might.
That's going to intensify it, and the outcome for that can be a bad one. There was a kid in Cornerbrook who was waiting for an ambulance with his mom. This is several years back, and the police showed up, and they put the mother in the back seat of the cruiser, and they went down and shot her kid 3 times. And that's a fact. That they had an inquiry on that. There was a bunch of rules handed down for them to go by after that, and showing up alone at these residences wasn't part of it, and they weren't supposed to go there just with the police either. They were supposed to go there with people from the mental health community that work in that part of it, in that field. And from what I gathered, none of that got done. And so, like, the amount of training that he would have had would have been more of a combat.
Why are you saying that? You have no idea. None. Zero idea. Right? But you're just throwing it out there.
Well, I can speak.
You can't speak to what happened yesterday because you weren't there.
The situation 3 times, Patty. I mean, this just didn't happen to me one time.
Why, did you ever deserve for the police to show up to your door? They don't show up. They don't pick. Look, I think it's ridiculous to say.
I'm not so sure if warranted or not, but I know that my reason for phoning the Confederation building was certainly warranted.
Did you ever threaten them? Did you ever threaten anybody?
Threaten them? No, sir.
What did they show up for? They never showed up to just break bread.
I would have been arrested at some point, Patty, if I had did anything wrong.
Well, why did they show up at your door? They didn't go to your house multiple times for a lark.
There were medical concerns that were very life-threatening to me, and I was being handled like they didn't give a shit, and eventually somebody with a medical condition is going to...
Okay, George, look, I mean, we don't know what's going on here, only what you perceive to have happened in your own circumstance. You're telling us that the police showed up unwarranted and with no cause multiple times for you having said nothing other than tell them that you have a physical illness. That's what you're telling me.
Like I said, I wasn't arrested either time because I did nothing wrong. I called the Confederation building looking for help with a medical issue that I had, and whether or not, like there was definitely no laws broken in my calendar. I may have been aggravation to them.
They don't show up because they're aggravated, right? Well,
why didn't they arrest me?
Because they investigated. See? To go back to the bare bones point. We don't even know what you said. I have no idea why they were at your house.
And it wasn't warranted. I mean, I didn't do anything wrong, and for them to show up like that, and
all right.
Again, like if this is how they continue it on, eventually you guaranteed that was going to happen.
Okay. Nobody knows, but fine. They showed up for no reason, and he's dead for no reason.
I'm just speaking from experience, right?
No, you're not. You're not even telling us what your experience is. You're saying that the cops showed up for no reason multiple times at your home. That's what you told me.
Telling you, I called the Confederation building.
Yeah, but what did you say?
Looking for help with a life-threatening situation.
Yes, and you said something that made the cops come. I got to go to the news. Okay, George, I hope things work out for you mentally, physically, and emotionally, and thanks for your time.
Thank you, Patty.
Okay, all right, bye-bye. We're taking a break. Don't go away. All right, Mr. Critch, how we doing? Yeah, we could use it for a few more calls, and it's a tricky day here, but of course there's always issues of concern that are outside the Dunphy shooting and anything else that are really tricky conversations, a lot yet to be determined and facts yet to be uncovered. But whatever you want to talk about this morning, anything under the sun, you take the opportunity to call the show. We're taking a break and then we're coming back. Welcome back to the program, line 2. Good morning, Colin. You're on the air.
Good morning, Mr. Daly. How are you?
Not too bad this morning. Thank you. How about you?
Great, thanks.
What's on your mind this morning, sir?
I'd like to weigh in on the shooting incident.
Yeah, go right ahead.
It just seems to me that for right off the top, why is it that one police officer went to this man's house? Why is it that there weren't two? And the second point that I wanted to make is in general, not just about this shooting, but any shooting involving any police force, is that you end up getting another police force called in to investigate that police force. And I think that there's an inherent bias and conflict of interest in that sort of investigative.
I assume we'll know a lot more about the police protocol and the way it was handled when Chief Jane speaks today. One of the key questions will absolutely be, how does a lone officer respond to that type of perceived threat? How does he visit that person's home alone? I mean, it's not only about the safety of the officer, but the safety of the citizen. It's about witnesses to whatever went on in that kitchen. It's going to leave a lot more questions than answers, and I'm sure Janes will have no choice but to deal with it pretty fundamentally today, because it's a big and a very important question.
Well, it is, and somebody has died here, and I'm not saying there's any criminal liability attached to this situation, but appearances are very important too. It's all about optics as well as
Well, faith in the police force is, I would suggest, 90% optics. People, if they see a police force behaving a certain way, like for instance had the incident where student protests in Montreal saw something shot into a face of a protester, that will be how people have seen a picture on the news. That's how they will determine how they gauge and judge every other action on that police force based on those types of images. So the optics of policing is going to be the biggest significant contributing factor how people either have faith or the lack thereof in the police force, no doubt.
Yeah. And another question is, this shooting allegedly took place inside a private residence. How did the police officer get inside the residence? He went there. He was either invited in and had the consent of the homeowner? Or if he wasn't invited in, how did he get in? Did he force his way in? Yeah. And if he didn't have a warrant to go into the residence, there's other issues there too, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of, legal issues and charter issues and stuff that surround just how it is that the police officer ended up in the house, irrespective of whether any confrontation takes place, you know.
I don't know what we'll find out today on that front. I assume James will be guarded in what he can and cannot disclose today, as the investigation has just begun. But these are all really important conversations and questions we need answers to, because the real summary of the story is that there's a man dead. We can judge for ourselves what we think to be a threat that deserves investigation or a visit to someone's home. We can talk about the mental health issue and what we should or should not be doing as law enforcement, how we respond to those calls. We can talk about his lot in life as an injured worker and living in poverty and in anguish and frustration and anger. We can talk about all those things, but ultimately, when people see this story unfold, we need to know how the police behaved. Was it inside their training and protocols and procedures? Was everything handled just and fairly? And what went on, to the best of our ability to find out? If we don't get it, then the perception of the police and the optics and the judgment of the police will be based on the fact that they think something untoward happened, a man died, and we will judge everything that the police does from this moment on based on these types of things. We've already had investigative faux pas and fiascos, how they've dealt with evidence, whether it be erased hard drives and or inappropriate interrogation techniques. So the police really do have to get the public back on side by complete, thorough investigations and public disclosure of all the facts so we can gauge for ourselves.
Absolutely, and another issue which arises here is, again, with constitutional rights and charter rights for this police officer, because he's being investigated now, he's the subject of a homicide investigation. There's a dual or two sides to this investigation. One is him as a police officer being investigated in the shooting, but there's also he gets the same constitutional rights that you or I would get. Mm-hmm. If we were interacting with the police and the police were questioning us, there's statements, out-of-court statements made to persons in authority, in this case, statements that he would be making to police officers, and whether they can be admitted against him in any subsequent criminal proceedings if it goes that far, and what statements that he has to make as a police officer during the course of an investigation like that would be required by statute or some other means. Yep. That he's obligated to make as a part of a police investigation, being that he is a police officer too. So it's about protecting his rights and also seeing that his obligations as a police officer are fulfilled too. So it's there's a dual dynamic there in that regard, I think. So it's very important to ensure that his constitutional rights are upheld, just like I would be advocating for you if you were in that situation,
Yeah, it's, there's a lot we have to understand here yet, and basically I hate to fall back to I don't know, but I think that's a rational response to say I don't know, because I haven't got enough facts to deal with. The questions that you pose that I think are extremely important to get answers to, we need those, and we need to know that we can have faith in the investigative team, whether it be the OPP brought in or whatever the case may be. We need to know what the hell's going on, and it's extraordinary that there's so many people quick to jump to conclusions and condemn either side already today, when in fact they have no idea why they feel that way. They're just happy enough to go down that road, and it's not helping anybody. I really appreciate your time as usual, Colin. Anything else you'd like to say this morning?
I just, generally speaking, on the issue of police officers investigating other police officers, I think we need a new sort of framework here, that when a situation arises like this, that we need some branch of the Department of Justice to be called in to investigate these types of shootings where police officers end up shooting other people, mm-hmm. and other serious incidents involving police officers. I don't know if it's going to be some totally new branch of the Department of Justice with people who have a background in police investigations and, the ability to recommend, criminal charges be laid or not laid. But this whole idea of bringing in, like you said, the Ontario Provincial Police or the Sûreté de Québec or the RCMP, it just gives the impression that there's a bias or a conflict of interest, you know.
And it always will be that way, you know. Investigating your own, the thin blue line, that kind of stuff, whether it be real or perceived, is what people actually latch onto. Is that it's hard to have police officers investigate their own, which immediately condemns their professionalism. And whether or not it's true, it's up to people's own personal opinion on the matter. But Colin, I certainly appreciate your call as usual, and have a great day.
You too, Paddy.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye now.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea Colin poses there, you know. How do we create an entity or a body that conducts these investigations of the police force? Because it's not just looking for an opportunity to out a bad cop, it's also protection of their civil liberties, and how we actually view them will be in large part determined with how we have faith in them, their ability to investigate themselves. Should it be the Ontario Police Department? And I know they've been here many, many times to investigate police issues and police matters. But is it time for a quasi-independent body? I really don't know the answers to it, but there are important questions that Colin brings forward. Once again, I'll check in with producer Ryan Critch, see what we're doing on the phones. How are we making out there, Critchy? Yeah, we could always use 4 more calls because it's Colin's show. We're taking a break. Don't go away. It is important to note that the Chief of Police, Bill James, will be addressing members of the media today at 11:30, immediately following this program. And then at 12:30, Premier Paul Davis will also be addressing the media and the province from the legislature. So those are 2 important news conferences that will take place today. Some people don't think it's a wise idea to talk about this particular shooting today until we find out more. But I think it's helpful when we pose all the questions so that people will have an understanding where we think we should go and things we think we deserve to know, what provoked what whenever went on. The investigation may indeed take longer than people hope for or think is legitimate, but that's the way this is all going to unfold. Mr. Critch tells me that there is a couple of people that have not answered the phone when we've called you back, and so this makes it a prime opportunity to jump on the program to talk about whatever you want. Look, whatever it is, I'm open to the conversation, Dunphy or otherwise. So when we come back, why don't you be there in the queue? Don't go away. All right, I'm not going to bother try to take another call because we're pretty close to the end. We do want to remind our listeners that at 11:30, the RNC Chief of Police, Bill James, will be speaking to the media. We all know, and it's been well documented this morning, there's a lot of important questions that need to be asked. Hopefully we get some answers. I don't anticipate that we'll hear a lot of those details offered by the Chief today, as the investigation has just begun. And then on the heels of Chief James, his address to the media, we'll also be hearing from the Premier of the province, Paul Davis. This is going to be a particularly tricky to navigate part of the story. People are willing to have made up their own mind already without any details to actually sink their teeth into. And that I don't think is going to serve any of us very well. But there are questions that I'm sure will be posed on behalf of all of us by the members of media in attendance today at both of those news conferences. We'll be carrying it, of course, here on VOCM. We have our reporters at both, and we'll be quick to share the information with you, both on our Twitter feed and, of course, at VOCM.com. It was a tragic, terrible, awful weekend, and I'm not so sure we are getting through it in very good stead, but we're going to try, and we're going to try and get the details as quick as they're available, and boy, oh boy, I don't know. You want to chime in with what you've heard here today, you can do it on social media. We're on Twitter. We're VOCM Open Line. Feel free to follow us there and chime in with whatever you got. Emails, absolutely flooded with emails today. It's openline at VOCM.com. We really appreciate people connecting with us through those 2 mediums. And certainly the callers, emailers, and tweeters, and everyone who tuned into the program this morning, thank you very much for your support of the show. Pete Soucy, he'll be here this afternoon with another edition of Back Talk, and Jonathan Risher along this evening with Nightline, and we'll pick up this conversation tomorrow morning right here on VOCM, CFCB, and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, Ryan Critch, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, unhappy day. We'll talk tomorrow. Bye-bye.